Welcome back to Dragonwings. Today we will be starting Chapter 9, The Dragon Wakes. As I've been saying a couple of times, but it just continues to happen, the relationship between Windrider, Moonshadow, Robin, and Miss Whitlaw is continuing to grow, and they're becoming closer and closer. So we're going to see what else happens with them in Chapter 9. Again, it is called The Dragon Wakes, and it is on page 189. And this chapter is going to take place from December of 1905 until April of 1906. So quite a long time. All right, let's see what happens. Here we go. By the time the winter rains came to the city, we were not becoming rich, but we were doing well. Each day we put a little money away in our old tin can. Father never said anything, but I knew he was thinking about the day when we might be able to afford to bring Mother over. You see, it was not simply a matter of paying her passage over on the boat. Father would probably have to go over after her and escort her across. There had to be money for bribes, tea money, Uncle called it, at both ends of the ocean. Now that we no longer belonged to the company, we somehow had to acquire $1,000 worth of property, a faraway figure when you can only save nickels and dimes. And yet the hope that we could start our own little fix-it shop and qualify as merchants steadily grew with the collection of coins in the tin can. I was happy most of the time when it became the time for the new year by the Tang people's reckoning. Our new year came a few months after the demon's new year, and our celebrating lasted for several days. Traditionally, it was a time for paying your debts and patching up any quarrels that may have occurred during the year. I had hoped that Uncle and Father would make up so we could spend Father's Day off, or at least an evening celebrating the new year with the company. But both Father and Uncle kept quiet. They were still hurt with one another. And perhaps, too, they did not trust their tempers yet. The first week of the new year is no time to become angry. Instead, we stayed at home in the stable. But we were not alone. Robin came to help us with the New Year's feast. We took the old picture of the Stove King and smeared some honey on it before we burned it in the stove. Later that evening, we would hang up a new picture of the Stove King that we had bought in the Tang people's town. That was a sign the Stove King had returned to his place above our stove. After we had finished burning the old picture, we sat down to a lunch of meat pastries and dumplings. Robin ate quietly, for her that is. Actually, she monopolized only half the conversation. "Look," she said, "my aunt would never go in for these pagan customs, not in her house. But I could sneak the old picture out and tell her you wanted to replace it with a new one. Then you can smear honey on it for her." "But you no believe in the Stove King." "Of course not," she snapped. She squirmed in her seat. "But it might make you feel better." I could see that she really wanted to make herself feel better. No sense taking chances with the supernatural, and so on. I could tell her train of thought because I sometimes carried a little cross she had given me in my pocket, just as insurance. I mean, maybe American demons could be scared off by American charms. "Sure, why not?" I said, feeling a little triumphant. I set the dumpling on my plate while the rain fell steadily on the roof. Later, Robin took her umbrella and fetched back the Stove King. We smeared extra honey on it. Father was not going to take chances. And then we burned it too. When it came time to hang up our new picture, I took out the extra picture of the Stove King that I had bought just in case Robin did decide to celebrate the new year properly. With a satisfied smile, I gave it to her. And then, as the winter rains gave way to spring, Uncle took the first step towards making peace. It was near the time of the Feast of Pure Brightness, when we go out to the graves and make offerings to the dead. It's not nearly as somber as it sounds. It is really the major festival for the springtime. We go out into the graves and sweep them and clean them and tell the dead about some of the things that have happened. Then we make them offerings of food, only we don't give all of it to them. After all, it's a banquet where we all share. So we take home some of the better things to eat, knowing the hungry dead will be happy. Unlike the other holidays, it is determined by a solar calendar like that of the demons, and so it is always on April 5th. The Tang people's cemetery at that time was not a permanent one. All Tang people wanted to be buried finally in their homeland. But there were often delays of several years between when a man died and when his body got shipped home. So there was a cemetery where the coffins were temporarily buried. Old Deerfoot, a houseboy in a mansion a few blocks away from us, came over one day. He did not rush into his business the way a demon might have. We spent a half hour over tea talking about the Tang people's town and our respective families back in the Middle Kingdom and how the boycott had affected them. The Tang people at home had tried to boycott demon goods until the demons stopped persecuting the Tang people over here in the land of the Golden Mountain. But it had failed. It was not until the second cup of tea that old Deerfoot got around to the purpose of his visit. The Feast of Pure Brightness is only a few weeks away, he said with a sigh. Where does the time go? It goes too fast, Father agreed. Old Deerfoot shook his head. I've way too many friends out there, biding their time till they go back home. I don't have nearly as many as you do, but I have a few too. Father held the cup between his two hands. Then you'll be going out? I don't know yet. The demons keep me pretty busy. Well, if you'll be needing a lift out there, Deerfoot said with pretended casualness. Your uncle said he would be going. Did he? Father finished the rest of his tea and pursed his lips while he thought. He looked at me. What do you think? It isn't my place to think, I said. Deerfoot laughed and Father made an exasperated sound. You know very well you'd like to go out with them. I just stood silent. Father turned to Deerfoot. Tell Uncle we'd appreciate the lift. Good, Deerfoot smiled. We drank 2 more cups of tea before it was a proper time for him to leave. As I washed the dishes, I said nothing. I did not even smile. But inside, I secretly thanked the Stove King perched above our stove. Early that morning, they pulled up in front of the house. We stood up from where we had been sitting on the front steps. I looked up at Father. He felt as shy as I did. Handclap was riding on the front seat of the wagon, the reins held loosely in his hands. He nodded to us. Father nodded back and slapped Red Rabbit on the rump. Is he giving you any trouble? No, Handclap said. He's still the laziest horse in the demon land. Father stuffed his hands back into his pockets. He's really not all that bad. Oh, no? Handclap raised his eyebrows. We started out yesterday morning just to get here. Ha, Father said. He reached over the side of the wagon and held out his hand, demon style, to the others. You're getting fatter, Lefty. Me? You're the one who's busting his clothes at the seams. Father shook White Deer's hand. You haven't started to sprout flowers yet. That's good. You haven't had enough vegetables. I see the red collar in you. White Deer laughed. Finally, Father took Uncle's hand. How are you, old man? Thought we'd be burying you this year instead of visiting the cemetery with you. Uncle snorted. Well, you young ones try. But if 50 years of demons couldn't put me under, you young punks aren't likely to. He leaned on the side of the wagon, looking down at Father with gruff good humor. You are looking good and prosperous. Well enough. These demons don't seem to understand their own machines. Then Uncle looked at me. He waved his hand. Come closer, boy. I'm not going to bite off your ear. I stepped closer. How are you, Uncle? Very well. For all you cared, you young scamp. He playfully boxed my ears. You turn 12, and you forget all about us. How come you never come by? Father put his hands on my shoulders. I'll have a talk with this boy, Uncle. He'll be by more often, even if I have to drag him into the store. You do that, Uncle smiled, and his whole face wrinkled upward in those happy curves. Now get on the wagon before that overfed, underworked horse of ours dies of old age. You would think, after that I would be happy, but I began to get uneasy. Thinking of the dead, I began to think about how quickly things pass by in this world. I had a feeling that all of this was likely to disappear, as if I was like the one of the heroes in the old tales, who comes upon a golden palace and is welcomed inside by the palace folk, and they are all beautiful and handsome and richly clothed. They wine him and dine him and sing to him until they put him to bed. The man goes to sleep in a golden palace and wakes up in a set of ruins, for the man had been the victim of illusions conjured by the demons. I had the feeling at times at our home, Miss Whitlaw and Robin could all be gone the next morning when I woke up. I was not far from wrong. We're going to stop there, and we're going to see what Moonshadow means by that when we read tomorrow.